In territory controlled by the government, restrictions on the free expression of critical or unpopular opinions and on participation in peaceful assemblies on sensitive topics, as well as the safety of human rights defenders in Ukraine, were of concern. Of particular concern is the lack of accountability for threats and violence targeting human rights defenders, media workers, and individuals who express opinions online or attempt to participate in policy making. While the government made some efforts to improve the situation, in most cases, authorities failed to protect members of civil society from attack or to hold perpetrators accountable. Impunity fuels further attacks, contributing to an environment of self-censorship, narrowing civic space, and curtailed pluralism. OHCHR also documented 14 incidents during the reporting period, including attacks, threats, and intimidation against human rights defenders who work on women's rights, gender equality, LGBTQI rights, anti-corruption, and environmental issues. In only one of these cases were the perpetrators identified and prosecuted. Such attacks and the lack of accountability discourage participation in public affairs and civic activism. Most of the 21 attacks against peaceful assemblies documented by OHCHR were targeted at protests by the LGBTI community, women human rights defenders, and opposition political parties. Civic space and fundamental freedoms in territory controlled by the self-proclaimed republics in eastern Ukraine have been severely restricted since the armed groups took control in 2014, leading to an erosion of space for free expression and independent activism. Both self-proclaimed republics amended their so-called administrative and criminal codes in order to curb critical opinions, including those expressed online, and to restrict participation in public affairs. They also arbitrarily detained or threatened to detain social media users for expressing their views online and individuals who participated in peaceful assemblies critical of decision-making in the territory. Human rights defenders left territory controlled by the armed groups after 2014, having faced reprisals for their work. Those who have remained and continue their work experience a high degree of insecurity, in particular women human rights defenders who support domestic violence survivors. In the autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation, we continue to document violations of international human rights and international humanitarian law. The situation continued to be marked by restrictions on freedom of expression, particularly targeting opinions critical of Russian Federation policies and practices on the peninsula. Journalists who expressed dissenting or critical views were subjected to surveillance, criminal prosecution, arrests, prohibition of entry into Crimea, and deportation from Crimea. Expression of dissenting political or alternative views through participation in public assemblies also continued to be curtailed in Crimea. The blanket requirement under threat of prosecution for prior authorization from the Russian occupation authorities to hold a peaceful assembly undermined this fundamental freedom. I would like to highlight the concrete recommendations contained in the report towards improving the human rights situation through fostering civic space, promoting fundamental freedoms, and enhancing inclusive working conditions and meaningful participation for all civil society actors throughout Ukraine. We call on all duty bearers to implement these recommendations and, as always, stand ready to assist in these efforts.